This is video number 4, which should wrap everything up. I'm going to finish going over this list of other notes for tips for your writing. So I ended with talking about using a writing voice versus a conversational speech. In video number 3, I went over A through E, okay? So be sure to use a writing voice and choose your vocabulary carefully. Don't use filler words, don't use conversational words that provide very little meaning in your writing. Try to elevate your writing above your conversational speech. Make sure you choose a meaningful title. I get titles all the time that just says urban geography paper or something like that. Make it a meaningful title that matches your topic. And make sure your title includes the geographical nature or aspect of your topic. So maybe you're studying gentrification in Columbus, Ohio, right? That's the geographical component because it includes a place, okay? Using the library is highly recommended. Of course, on an online course, you might be working from home, but use your library resources to look at journals. Just using Google Scholar, that sort of thing, is very limited. You can't find things as easily as you would using library sources or even going to the library and taking the Urban Geography Journal off the shelf and looking at the table of contents and going through each book of the urban geography issue and looking at the table of contents. That may seem silly, but it's actually often more effective than doing a search online, okay? Make sure you're looking at the specific and targeted journals that make sense for your topic. Start with the list that I gave you in the syllabus, okay? Common problems that I see in papers are sloppiness. Waiting to the last minute can lead to sloppiness, relying on the internet too much, quoting too much, using the same words over and over, using the same references, the same sources over and over. Make sure you're diversifying your sources, you're diversifying your vocabulary, right? These sorts of things. Spelling out contractions looks better. It's a higher level of writing. Instead of saying won't or don't, say will not or do not. Numbers. When a number starts a sentence, let's say 500 people in Columbus, Ohio were forced to move. That sentence started with the word 500, so you would spell it out. However, if the number is in the middle of a sentence or within a sentence, you can use the number instead of spelling it out. You should always use the number unless it's the first word in the sentence, and then you spell it out. Okay? If you are talking about a percentage of something, also within the sentence, use the number and the percent symbol. Okay? So that's the standard for numbers. Geography is very visual. Please use graphics and images to make your points. Source the data. A little tip. Let's say you're getting information from the Census Bureau and you really want to show the demographics of a particular city or a neighborhood within a city. And you see the numbers and you're like, oh, this would be great as a pie chart. But no pie chart exists. So you just make your own. So you use the numbers from the U.S. Census Bureau. Let's say 40% were Caucasian, 30% were African American, and 25% were Asian, and 5% other, right? Use those numbers, make your own pie chart in Excel or other, it's probably other ways to do it. I use Excel. And it would be your pie chart, but you still source the data. So in your figure source, you would have your caption, figure number, let's say it's 4, you'd have your caption, demographics of Columbus, Ohio, and then for your source, you would write data source, U.S. Census Bureau, let's say it was 2010. Okay, that tells me when you put the phrase data source, that tells me that your data is from the U.S. Census Bureau, but you made the pie chart, right? When you put data source : U.S. Census Bureau, 2010. Make sense? Okay, so you can make your own graphics. All right, that ends that handout. Let me go to this last handout that's included on Blackboard. This just gives you some other information about references and some other things. I did give you a preferred reference format to use. It's a format that geographers use. It's a version of Chicago. It uses in-text citations with author and date. And then in the works cited list or reference list, this is how it's cited in this example given to you. Okay, so you have the author first, and if it's a book, if it's a journal article, if it's a lecture, I have all different examples. I even have an example of a web source. Okay, not that you should have many web sources, but you might have some for government documents. Okay, so I've given you examples of how to source these. You can also, so this is a version of Chicago, it's the 15th edition used by geographers. You can also click on this link as it takes you to a style sheet. It's the last 2 pages of the document in the link. If you just go to the link, it's going to be overwhelming to find it yourself. Just scroll all the way down and go to the last 2 pages, okay? And it gives you examples of how to cite. Most importantly, be consistent in your formatting and the information you provide. Let's say the publisher is first, but you put the publisher after the title. But it should go before the title. As long as you've been consistent and the publisher is always in the same spot, it's always after the title or always before the title, I'm not going to care that much. I want you to be consistent. And I want you to have all of the information necessary, okay? All relevant information should be included. And make sure you're consistent in your formatting, not only where like the publisher goes in the order, but also, let's say your title is in italics. If in another reference, the title is all bolded and all in caps, it's not the same. The title is different formatting. That's going to lower your grade. Make sure the formatting is consistent. All titles are in italics or in all caps or whatever it may be. Be consistent and include all relevant information. Author always goes first in alphabetical order. You must always have an author, period. No exceptions. Sometimes a person's name is not listed as the author. That's okay. Who is responsible for that information? If it's not a person's name, it must be an agency or an organization. So let's say you go to Urban Land Institute and you download one of their reports about Chicago. And there's no name listed as an author. What do? You list Urban Land Institute as the author and also as the publisher. You can list them twice within the entry, okay? You must have an author, always, always, always. No exception, okay? And if you can't figure out this information, then maybe your source is no good. So keep that in mind, okay? When you have a web source, you have to have an author. Here, there was no name available, so I used the publisher, okay? And the date was listed. Sometimes there's no date. If there's no date listed for the report, question that report. There should always be a date on government reports, on think tank reports. There should be a date. If for some reason there's no date, first of all, you need to question the source. And then secondly, if it seems like it's right, and there's still no date, then you put the date you accessed it. So it would be 2019 in this case for this course. Okay. I talked about in-text citations already, but you really should read through this, okay? I'm not going to read through this for you, but you should read these 2 paragraphs, okay? I've kind of covered some of this already. You should do it. You should read it again, okay? And then here is again that same example of my writing, just to show you again in a different handout. Do not cite your search engines. Let's say you go onto your library site to look at journals, and you use Academic OneFile, or you use GeoRef, or one of the many search engines that they use. You don't put that in your citation. You put the journal volume number, all of that kind of information. I don't care what search engine you used, okay? And I don't have access to the same search engines that you do, so there's no point in putting it, okay? I've told you this before, but to reiterate, you cannot use Wikipedia, citydata.com, dictionaries, encyclopedias. These are all secondary or tertiary sources. They're not primary sources. They're not academic. You cannot use them, okay? I will immediately eliminate that part from your paper and it won't count. Make sure you're citing properly and you're not plagiarizing. Plagiarizing is cause for failing. You don't want to fail your paper because you didn't cite properly, okay? So read through this, make sure you know how to cite properly. I've said a few of these things already in a different video, so I don't want to be redundant. If you didn't watch the other videos, make sure you read through this carefully and maybe watch the other videos, okay? Need to paraphrase or put in quotes, but quotes is generally considered lazy writing, okay? You should only quote under extreme circumstances like I showed you in the other video, okay? And then I just have a little bit of information about what makes a source primary. This is essentially the highest level data you can gather from your research. It's the most reliable, valid, scientific. So you need primary sources, okay? And every image needs to be sourced or referenced unless you took the picture. And if you're worried that I'm going to say, oh, you didn't put a source on this picture, put your name on it as the source. That way I know for sure you took the picture. You'll provide the date with your last name, and then in your reference cited list or works cited list, you put yourself as a reference. Normally you don't do that in a paper, but if you want to make sure I'm not making the mistake of thinking, oh, you didn't source this picture, then just cite yourself, okay? Make sure if you're searching online for images, like you want to include a snapshot of something in your city, Google Images is never the source. Go to the original website where you got it from. And I caution you to do this very much. It can be useful on occasion for a snapshot of a particular thing, but really you shouldn't be doing this very much at all. Okay, that's the end of the last video. Let me know what questions you have.